Thank you all for attending today. We're excited to host all of you here for this Amazon Web Services and Ping Identity Luncheon virtually. We're here on behalf of our partnership with AWS. Ping Identity and AWS have developed an integration and go-to-market strategy that's hyper-focused on the needs of our mutual customers. AWS partners with Ping Identity because of our proven track record with some of the largest companies in the world and our extensive experience solving some of the most complex authentication use cases for the global enterprise. We're excited for this lunch and to learn more about the Da Vinci use case here with Ping Identity. With AWS, we offer simplified procurement through AWS Marketplace, eliminating the need for purchase orders and disparate contracts and billing. Customers are also able to tap into committed spend with AWS to make marketplace purchases of Ping Identity, freeing up funding for pressing identity projects that you might have. Lastly, Ping Identity customers qualify for marketplace promotional offers, like one that we have running now through the end of this year, where you can receive up to 3% of the TCV of your deal back in marketplace promotional credits with AWS. With that, I'm going to hand it over to Nathan to go through some of the Da Vinci use case. We hope you all enjoy the show and take care. We look forward to talking to you soon.
All right, very good. Okay, thank you for being here. My name is Nathan Sargent. I'm a solution architect with Ping Identity. I've been with Ping for about 15 years, and in that time, I've seen a lot of things come and go in the identity and access management space. This is probably the most exciting thing that I have encountered in the last 2 decades. Ping's been around for almost over 2 decades, and I've been with it for a lot of that time. And I've seen a lot of things happen in the identity and access management space. I used to be in a very operational role in a security operations center, working for a data company. And we had a lot of things that were going on, a lot of different products, a lot of different point products. And that made it challenging to bring everything together in one place. So when I see this happening across other vendors, it makes me flip back to those times where we struggled to kind of bring things together and make different products work together. And you even see that today. You see a lot of different products that are hard to integrate, even from the same vendor. Sometimes it doesn't work as well as you'd like it to. So orchestration is that key element that we've been kind of missing this whole time. And we're going to talk about that for a little bit today. Now, when we look at the big ecosystem of this, as any user is trying to get to any asset, well, we don't naturally think about orchestration as a term, something that's kind of come into the market recently, but we intuitively know this needs to happen. We're going to go through the process of trying to detect who that user is. We're going to verify their identity, make sure they are who they say they are physically, and then match that up to a digital profile where we can authenticate them, we can put policy data there, we can authorize them, and then allow them to have access to that asset. When we look at orchestration, part of the reason for why is just that. We want to be able to bring these different services together in one place, be able to really look at the whole flow, or what we call a journey, from start to finish, be that a simple registration process, or if that is a user that's logging in and trying to verify their identity to get to an asset. From an administrative side, that's kind of a hard job sometimes. Again, as I said, even if we're using all of our own products, which we know at Ping that that's not always the case. I came from a vendor that was a stack vendor, and they wanted you to buy everything from them, and everything was supposed to work perfectly together. And we all know that that doesn't always work. Most of the time, it doesn't work. So when we have all these different systems together that we have to do something with, you have to have some glue to bind it together. And that's really what orchestration is all about. It's a solution to be able to bring together different authentication methods, different signals from risk or threat that we all have to use to have good decisions about whether we authenticate or register or service a particular user. Now, from the business side, this helps us do things a lot faster. We recently had a customer that was going to look at a 12-month period to bring their site to life, and they did it through Da Vinci in about 2 months. So you can see that's a pretty significant savings in time and agility. We'll see why that happens as we go through this a little bit. This is the reality. And when you look at this slide, you realize that we get mired down in all these little tiny operational problems. So if we just take a simple flow of a user visiting website, the first thing I want to do, especially if it's consumer facing, is I want to check to make sure this isn't some sort of fraudulent activity. It's not a bot. I don't have people coming in trying to do account takeovers or testing accounts or testing credit cards and things like that. So I want to engage some fraud services, some threat services, but it's very difficult to kind of build those together quickly before I let this user come in and try to do registration, which I have to build that process too. That's kind of a hard thing. And that registration process may not be as hard and fast as I like it the very first time. I may want to have a couple different iterations of that. And this old process where we have singular tools that we're working with doesn't allow for a lot of A/B testing. Once we've gotten the user in, then I might want to do something a little bit more convenient for them. We all know that multi-factor is kind of the norm today. Everybody's kind of pushing for multi-factor. But especially in a customer experience, workforce experience is one thing, because you can kind of make your users do what you want them to because they're your employees, but that doesn't mean they like it. And oftentimes we're seeing more and more breaches because of MFA. People get MFA fatigue. They get tired of having something pushed to their phone or yet another OTP to type in just to get their job done. Customers hate it. And if your login experience is too frictionful, then they're going to go to another reseller. They'll find somebody else to buy their product from and somebody else to do their business with. That's just the reality we live in. So being able to be flexible in my authentication choices is really important. Being able to look at the risk of that transaction and say, maybe I don't need to do MFA this time because of certain reasons. And then at the end of this, I've already caused so much friction for the user that either my system doesn't provide it, or it's very onerous for me to ask the user for progressive information, progressive profiling. So what do? We can go through the same exact process, but with orchestration, you can bring this up a complete level. Instead of worrying about how I interact with fraud vendor 1, 2, or 3, I'm thinking more about having less risk right off the bat of this user coming in. This a good, hopefully a good potential user, a real user, and I have a much higher conversion rate into a registered user that may actually do business with me. That's a good thing. Being able to do A/B testing helps me really, really optimize my user experience. We know that users want things that are new and different all the time. You want to introduce new things to them. You need to be flexible and able to do that quickly. And that's what that provides you. When we get down to the MFA and high risk kind of conversation, that really makes it more convenient for the user while still maintaining the security that we're looking for. We can't have just username and password and no other checks in today's age. We need to do something more secure than that. But at the same time, we want that user friction to be as low as possible. And then finally, on the back end of this, the progressive profiling, being able to not have to have that user add everything about them at the beginning, but rather asking them for information a little bit over time. So maybe I start out with just an email and I can make this a very nice passwordless flow, and then move on to asking them their first name and last name and then their address as they get to the point where they're ready to buy something or they need me to ship them something, depending on the user population. So it allows us to make that less friction, but still gathering a lot of information over time. So let's start looking at the platform and kind of see how this works. I've got a couple videos here to walk through. This particular one is about the connectors, and we'll talk about what connectors are as this goes through. All right, I'm going to speed this particular video up because it does go a little bit long, and we can go through this kind of quickly. The goal here is to have connections. Connections do things. If you think about a flow diagram, you have choices, decisions, and objects that happen. Same thing happens here. The node or the connector is the core of DaVinci. And this could be an authentication process. This could be a computation process. This could be interacting with Facebook for login, Microsoft for login. You can see that there are some ping things on the screen, but there's a lot of stuff that's not ping things on the screen. And that's really important. Being able to have this library of connections that you can go to that are already pre-built, that you can just drop into a flow and immediately you've got MFA, or you've got an authentication method, or you've got a threat metrics score coming back at you. That's really important and makes it very fast to make these things happen. The other thing is we have the ability to build your own connections. We have partners that build them. You'll see some examples of that as we go through this. And we obviously are adding to this all the time. Anything that has an API out there you can use to call out to. So the flexibility this product has as far as interacting with a lot of different things is really amazing. One of the reasons that I'm really excited about it, because it gives me as a solution architect a lot of flexibility to incorporate all the things the customer already has that are ping and not ping, to give them one way to build a user journey that satisfies incorporating all of those different technologies at once. Okay, great. So let's move on a little bit. Let's start out, and this is the way I normally talk about orchestration, because this is the way I think very visually. And oftentimes these meetings are in person, and we'll start at a whiteboard or on the back of a piece of scratch paper. So what is the flow that you're going for? What is the journey that you want this user to go on? Whether it's an employee or a customer or business partner, you've got some process that you need to have happen. And it could be something just as simple as what we have here. A user logs in. Well, great. We've checked their username and password. That's pretty rudimentary. But now let's add a little bit more to that. Let's check to see if that password has been compromised. Well, how do I do that? I need to call out to a service that actually can check that for me. All right, great. And what do we do if we find that this has been compromised? Well, let's make them change their password. And if not, and when they're done with that, let's also pull some information about them from our CRM service. We'll evaluate the risk of the whole transaction. And then based on the risk level that we get, we will potentially block the transaction. We may let them straight through without MFA, or we may step it up to have them do MFA if they haven't done it in a period of time, or if they're coming from the same IP address, et cetera. So we'll talk about risk and how that works. Let's take a look at how this is built in DaVinci. We'll talk about a workflow here. And hopefully it's large enough so you can see. We'll kind of walk through this a little bit. Now I'm going to speed this up. This whole thing is only a few minutes, but we'll kind of walk through it. This is the process of building this flow. Maybe I won't speed it up because there are a couple of things to note here. I'm starting off with a simple username password field like we showed in the diagram before. I'm going to go check that user. I'm going to make sure that they exist, and then I'm going to go check to make sure that their password is what they put in the field. And then I can kind of build onto that. I want to go check to see if their password has been compromised and start building out the flow here. I want to be able to have something that's fairly dynamic. I need something that is going to give me some functionality about deciding whether yes or no, which path to go. So as you can see, as we're building this out, we're pulling information from the previous nodes as we build this and are using that information as we go along. That'll become more apparent as we see the results that come back at the end of the transaction, because we will try this. This is the Flow Studio. This gives the administrator or administrators the ability to come in and create these flows that you embed right in your website or as an API call or several other ways of integrating it. A lot of times people will be using these directly through Ping Federate, one of our authentication products. So in this particular case, we're doing a specific REST call. We want to call it to REST service, and then we're calling our risk service. The risk service is very interesting. We look at a lot of different things in the risk, things that you would expect and some of you wouldn't. We're going to demo this with a VPN, so a known IP address and then one that's kind of anonymized. That will kick the risk score up because of the way we have it weighted. But the risk engine will also look at user behavior over time. Have I been logging in from the same laptop with the same fingerprint, same profile for the last 2 weeks? Yes, I have. Well, maybe I don't need to do MFA. Now, we also look at things like travel velocity. Can you be in Spain and then in Seattle within 5 minutes logging in? No, you can't. That's probably a really high risk. We also look at things like IP velocity and user velocity. We see a lot of users coming in on the same IP address, a lot of IP addresses coming in for the same user, all kinds of things like that. You get to weight what that is. You can set different risk levels and policies for different environments, different user populations, things like that. In this scenario, we have defined what population or the policy that we want for this risk and are just letting the API take care of it. We also feed that back so the machine learning engine will also know whether this was a good response, how the response turned out, and it builds and builds into that machine learning in the risk engine. Now we're adding the OTP here for doing MFA. And you can see that there's a straight line right above that where the risk is low. Then it goes straight on to the end state of giving the users the success message. But if it's a medium risk, then we go into MFA and then finally over. We can deploy this and we can trial it right here in this interface. I don't have to go to some other test lab. I can test it right here. I can see if my flows are working. You can see here, this was stop it right there so you can read that. We pulled in the user, we authenticated them. Federico is there, authenticated. We pulled information from the CRM system to figure out where he is. And then we kind of gave him a response of what his risk score was for being low. All right, let's try this again real quickly. And we'll do this through an anonymized IP address. We'll do it through a VPN. And run the scenario again. And this time, you'll see after he logs in that it immediately goes to the MFA process. So very quickly, you can set up a flow in under 10 minutes that does a very, very good job of helping you sort through when a user needs to be authenticated more or less, and being able to take that and have some actionable events about it. All right, let's take this a step further. One of our products, Ping One Verify, adds to this. I mentioned this before. It's really important that a user is who they say they are, not just in a digital format, but also in a physical format. So what we'll be doing in this is adding to a registration flow that we already had, much like the one we built at the very beginning, and add the verification process to it. This doesn't take too long. I am going to speed it up a little bit so that you can kind of get through to the where we're actually doing the verification. Very similar. We're going through and adding boxes. You can see it's an existing flow. We can rearrange them as we want, bringing in the services as we need, checking MFA, checking verify, etc. Well, let's go for just a second here. Just to give you a second to look at this. I know it's going kind of quickly. So there's a custom or a HTML template that we added in there, and we're incorporating the QR code right in it so that this can be a completely app-less experience for the user. We want the user to be able to scan a QR code, open up on your phone, and go to a browser in your phone, never having to download anything. Let's slow this back down a little bit. All right, so the user is going to log in, and we are going to have them register a little bit more information, as you can see here. Username, first name, last name, and a phone number. We may use those as part of our MFA process if we're going to use that. But you can add as much information as you want right there. All right, the key here is we're going to be able to scan this with our phone. Alden's going to scan it with her phone. She's going to then pull out her driver's license. She's going to verify by scanning the front and the back of her driver's license. We'll take the barcode off the back of it and verify that against the DMV. You could also be using a passport. We're going to check her face here in a moment. We're going to make sure it's a live face. And we're going to match that against the face that's on the driver's license itself. So we're doing a lot of different checks here, but this in the end will give you an absolute verification that the user physically is who they digitally claim to be. You can have all the information that's captured during this authentication or this verification process. We keep it for 30 minutes and then we let it go. We don't store it after that. And there you go, end of the flow. Excellent. All right, now I mentioned it before, I'll talk about it again. Ping One Risk really helps with fatigue of MFA. We've seen a lot of breaches starting to occur because either as an employee or as a customer, when your phone starts blowing up every 3 seconds with a new OTP or a push notification, well, a lot of people will just push it and accept it and make it go away. And that is exactly when the hacker gets it. And we've seen breaches like that happen. So that is kind of a problem. Let's kind of show you how we can fix that. All right, we'll take a simple flow just so you can see the elementals here. Simple username, login, and a couple other things that we'll start talking about. We're doing a push notification here. And that pushes out to an app on the phone, either yours or ours. This is a simple flow. We tried to keep it simple for the explanation on this particular one, but the analytics are really important here. You can take the analytics and see exactly what happened in the flow. So if you're curious about which path something went down, well, this is a great way of doing it. I am going to speed this one up a little bit because we have a little bit of configuration. Even though it's only a couple minutes, I know how it is when you're sitting in watching something like this. So we're going to add a couple things here. We're going to take out just the username and password and then just doing MFA. And we're going to split those apart and kind of see how we grabbed this and moved it around. Here's how we're introducing risk to this. This is Ping service. Could be anybody else's. Remember, we realize that you have other services in your environment that you need to work with. Exactly what this is for. So we're going to grab the risk level that's coming back from the risk service. Again, very important to be able to gather signals from your environment, be it ours or others, as you go through this to help these users get through this process as frictionlessly as possible, but while you're still maintaining the most secure posture you can. Do a little bit of rearranging. As you can see, you can kind of grab things, drag and drop. You can choose whether it's a positive flow or a negative flow. In other words, a true false type of scenario to control which direction the flow is going to go. As I mentioned, the risk model, we do return information back to it, and that's what we were adding right there. So it is a closed loop system. In other words, it gives some feedback to the system that makes it better each time that a transaction goes through. And let's give it a try. All right, so this time logging in, same as before. But now what's happening as far as our risk process? Well, we didn't even see our MFA pop up. What happened? Well, that's because the response came back from our service that we had a low risk. And you can see the highlighted boxes and the unhighlighted boxes. It never passed the MFA because of the choices. If you looked at those objects on the right-hand side and clicked on one of those, it would tell you all the details of what happened in that particular object. All right, so that in a nutshell is kind of what we're talking about when we talk about orchestration. Now, I mentioned that our partners are greatly involved in this as far as building connections and using this. So we thought it might be nice if we shared with you a couple journeys that they went through in making this. So Accenture is our first one, and they took this from a healthcare perspective.
When it comes to our health, the decisions we make are determined by one thing: trust. We look for healthcare providers we trust to offer the care we need to ensure our physical well-being. But it's not just our physical health that needs to be handled with care. In the age of telehealth and digital communication, it's important to be able to choose who we share our data with and to know where it's being stored and what it's being used for. That's why Accenture set out to prove that a more secure and convenient patient experience doesn't have to be a dream. It's absolutely possible. Using Ping 1 DaVinci, Accenture created a healthcare use case to keep patient interactions frictionless while keeping their data secure. In this example, a patient, Curtis, has just wrapped up a routine checkup with his doctor. Before he leaves the office, the front desk gives him a temporary login so he can create an account with that provider's office. Once Curtis gets home, he sits down to complete the registration process. After entering his information, Curtis is prompted to verify his ID quickly and securely, using advanced facial recognition and a government ID. Everything checks out, and his account is created. With just a few clicks, Curtis is able to access his patient dashboard and enjoy fine-grained access to his patient data consents, as well as the retrieval of past records. Curtis can choose which information is shared with which doctors, family members, or next of kin using Patient Data API, information like prescriptions, medication history, or other records. If a provider needs additional information from Curtis, they can request that information within their own dashboard, and he will be prompted to approve or deny that request for access. Not only does this keep his data secure, but it gives Curtis a complete view of who he interacts with regarding his health. For added security and convenience, Accenture seamlessly added Ping's multi-factor authentication to their user flows, which enables a passwordless login experience for patients, providers, and caretakers. Equipped with a blank digital canvas and paintbrush, Accenture was able to use DaVinci to paint the perfect patient experience, one that is delightfully frictionless and secure enough to protect patients' sensitive digital interactions. At Ping, we call this the art of the possible.
Every customer wants an intuitive, trusted, secure, and personalized experience when they interact digitally. But what that actually means is unique to each individual. After all, everyone has different wants, different needs, different journeys, and Deloitte's customer identity and access management offering can cater to each of them. Using Ping DaVinci's identity orchestration capabilities, Deloitte has developed workflows that enable passwordless authentication, identity verification, delegating account access to family members and others. Here we'll show you how these work on our demo bank site. Joe is looking for a fast and secure way to access his bank account. He clicks on the passwordless login option and is prompted to scan a QR code with his mobile device. His mobile device prompts him to provide consent and use FIDO-certified biometrics to authenticate himself. After entering a one-time passcode sent to his email, he is logged into his bank application. Meanwhile, Sandy is trying to open a new checking account with Bank. During her registration journey, she is required to verify her identity by providing her email ID and agreeing with the terms and conditions. She is then asked to scan a QR code on her mobile device, which initiates the verification process. She is prompted to scan and upload her government-issued identity documents using her mobile device and takes a selfie to complete the verification journey. Sandy is also looking to delegate her account access to her teenage daughter with a restricted transaction limit. For this, she goes through the dependent onboarding process, provides the necessary information driven by the policies and controls defined in DaVinci. Both Joe and Sandy have different starting points in their journey, yet they end up at the same place, satisfied with an easy experience that makes them feel safe and catered to. Deloitte's end-to-end offering can be automated and deployed quickly. Our turnkey solution installs a sense of confidence with your customer with a connected, easy-to-use, trustworthy, and personalized experience. Deloitte reimagined what's possible with Ping's DaVinci and created their own signature piece of art.
I've been very impressed with the way that our partners have picked up this technology and grabbed it and run with it and made it their own. I appreciate the time you've given me today, and I yield the floor.